everyone. I hope you're well. I've put together a presentation today, mostly focusing on actually how to write a CV that is going to sort of stand out, I guess. And we're going to also talk a little bit about cover letters and LinkedIn profiles as well, because they kind of, in this day and age, they go hand in hand, where you a lot of recruiters not only will be looking at someone's CV, but they'll also be looking at LinkedIn as well. Or if they find LinkedIn, then they might be requesting your CV after that. So we're going to look at all three, but the primary focus at the start is going to be on CVs. So as Phoebe said, my work history has been primarily as a recruitment manager across the world, really. But my most recent experience is definitely within the Middle East, and I'm now focusing on my own business, which is CV writing, because I have such a passion for it. And having worked in recruitment, I've seen thousands of CVs in my lifetime where you know, not all are standout, and not some are amazing, but it's really, and even in the last few years, to do with technology, there's been so many changes that you need to have a look at how you write your CV and making sure that it gets into the right hands to even get a shot at a CV, because you will probably know, I mean, industries are very fluid and up and down, and it's hard to know whether you, you know, particularly people who are losing their jobs right now, or were planning to leave jobs and consider new jobs. The market has just been so crazy in the last few months that it's hard to see, you know, where do I go? How am I going to get myself noticed amongst the even more people who've since become unemployed from losing their jobs through redundancy or layoff because there's no work. So when people are now starting to look for work, you have to really try and make sure that your CV is one that's going to get out. So we'll talk to you about, well, I'll talk to you about the CV, and then also a little bit about networking and how to get yourself out there even more. So I'm going to start with my presentation. I'm just going to share my screen here. So hopefully you can all see that. So the first thing we're going to go through is, okay, so what is a CV? So I'm going to run through these slides fairly quickly so that you're able to, so just pay attention. We will send out this slideshow to people at the end of the session as well, so that you've got it, but I'll just run through this quickly so you can really look at the different parts of the CV. So CV, the full name is actually curriculum vitae, which means course of life. So basically it's going through what you've done in terms of skills, education, experience, course of life being your professional life. Depending on which country you come from, some people might call it a CV, some people might call it a resume. So generally US and some Canada, Asian countries, those kind of countries call it a resume. UK, Australia, and other places call it a CV. And again, it goes through your education, skills, and experience. It's important because it provides that overview, and 95% of employers will expect to review a candidate CV if they're looking to apply for a job. Of course, there's always going to be networking or people you might know or whatever. And some people say, oh, I've never had a CV, but it is really important to have one ready to go, because it's high chance that you will be asked. It really creates that first impression. They say that recruiters basically spend around 6 seconds looking at a CV before they go on to the next one. And when you are looking at jobs that are advertised, and you could be looking at, if you have a think about somewhere like Emirates, where they would just get thousands and thousands of CVs in daily, weekly, monthly, your CV really needs to stand out. And there's a system, the online systems that use that, which we'll go into a little bit more later, will filter your CV in or out depending on what's written on it. So you really need to know that making that first impression is critical, and having the right information in is really important. So the standard practice at the moment, we're really looking at a 2 A4 page document. It's not to say that your CV can't be longer than that, but we really try and fit as much information into those 2 pages without it being crowded. So it's trying to work out what's the most important information that you're trying to get across that can be done in 2 pages. Some employers will say even 1 page. I think that's a little bit short. I don't think you're going to get yourself across, but we really try and, if you can try and aim for that 2 pages, that's best. It needs to be really clear and concise. Don't put in fancy graphics, logos, tables, special effects, these kind of things. For a recruiter, it's distracting. We just want to get as much information clearly as possible without being too over the top and too disjointed because we're being distracted by fancy things. It needs to catch the reader's attention immediately. So layout is really important. You need to make sure that the information that you're putting in, the way that it's structured, is clear for the reader to get that information straight up, and making sure that you have enough white space. Don't try and fill the whole document with words. Don't put, your margins at 2 millimeters and trying to fill as much information in, because then it just becomes chaotic and it's hard to read. In terms of what not to put in a CV, now this is really hard to say in the Middle East because so many people have so many different ideas of what they should have. I'm going to go by the standard rules that you might follow in the UK and other sort of more Western countries, because I think that that's sort of more of a progressive way of looking at it, and it's how I view things as professional. So photographs. Now, a lot of people, and for some reason, I don't know why, use their passport photo in their CV. They're not usually great. They do sort of, they're not necessarily going to be the nicest photo of you. It's not to say that you can't have a photo. If you're in a position, if you're applying for a position where, if you were in a creative type of thing where your face is going to be the face of the company, that type of thing, then perhaps that might be something. But in general, we say to leave them out. Any personal information, so your age, nationality, gender, religion, people will put their blood group into their CV. This is all information that we don't need, and it's unnecessary. So religion, marital status, whether you've got children, that's all not necessary. You also don't need to put in any reasons why you left a job. You can state that if you're in a short-term position, you can say, this was a contract role or something along those lines, if that's true. But if they really want to know, they're going to ask. And the other thing is to do with referees. So traditionally, a lot of people would put their referee details in with their contact name, phone number, and so forth. Again, this is space wasting. If people need to contact someone to ask for a reference check against you, then they will ask. So that's another thing you just don't need. What you do need is your name, your phone number, your email address, a LinkedIn hyperlink so they can access your LinkedIn account straight away. You just need to put your city of residence, so Dubai, UAE, or Abu Dhabi, UAE. You don't need to put in a whole lot of information about what your street number is and the community that you live. And if you've got a personal website, that's also important to put in as well, particularly if you're in a design type role, creative role, and you have a website that showcases your portfolio. That's certainly important as well. Now, in terms of a personal profile, so we break our CVs up into sections, which I'm sure most of you are aware, but I'll just give you a little bit more insight into these. So your personal profile is the first bit of information that you provide after your contact details. Personal profile is basically a professional summary of who you are. So it really just outlines in a few short sentences who you are, what you're doing, and what you're wanting to do. Can range from even 2 sentences through to a paragraph, and it really just gives the recruiter an idea of your primary skills and abilities. So it's kind of something that you'd say, I'm an IT professional with over 15 years experience in the technology industry. I'm passionate about something, and then I'm keen to move into a role where I can accept challenges and so forth. So it's really just an overview of who you are and your primary skills and abilities. The focus of the personal profile is really going to be dependent on the job that you want. One thing you need to know with job applications and CVs is that you really need to tailor your CV to the job you're applying for. So it's not about just having a one CV fits all type scenario. You really need to be able to say, okay, I'm applying for this, if it's a marketing job, and you want to focus your CV on the marketing experience you've had. If you've, say, been a marketer and you've also been a teacher and you've also worked in a fruit and vegetable shop, your focus is definitely going to be on the marketing side and not focusing on all the different industries that you've been in. You would still say that you've worked in different industries, but your focus is going to be on the marketing side. And that goes through with your personal profile. So target the information to the, tailor your information to the targeted job.
Elissa,
say for example,
we have a question. I think this may be a right point to address that. So one of the questions which we received is from Zaid Al-Dawaf. Zaid, thank you for the question. So his question is, what is the priority? Achievements or job description? I have been advised to add my achievements more than the description.
Correct. We're going to the next section.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're going on to so I'll just get past here. So the key skills and experience. So again, this is to do with highlighting your key skills and experience. So we're looking at dot points that would stand out, using both hard skills and competencies. So we'll get to this, it's the next slide after this. Recruiters really also don't just think that jobs are, yes, I've got experience in budget control and I've got experience in, multiple spreadsheets, and I've got experience in, hard skill type things. You really need to include things along your communication skills, leadership skills. These kind of things really stand out as well. So this is the area that we can look at for key skills, and not using run-of-the-mill skills as well. So you really need to think outside the box and be able to say, okay, what do I have that might stand out to a recruiter who's also looking at 300 other CVs? So having a think about what it is that you can really do that other people might not necessarily have that skill. Again, these can be interchangeable depending on the job, and it's really important for applicant tracking system tracking, which I will explain very shortly. Okay, so key achievements. So this is where we're moving more into the real guts of the CV. So what used to be traditionally CVs, you would list the job that you had with your employer and list them, and you'd list the duties. Now what people really are looking for is achievement-based results. So what they want to have is, you want to have this information on the first page because it needs to really be drawing out. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Now, obviously, in terms of achievements, measurable achievements, you typically think this might be in a sales role, but it can be across all industries and all jobs. So what we're looking at is quantifiable, measurable results. So we look at things like growth, reduction, impact, and frequency. So these are things like increased sales by such and such a percent during this period, and add a percentage in that. Or you might look at, say for example, a reduction. I implemented a new method of doing something which reduced the man hours taken to do this, or I was able to reduce client turnover, I was able to reduce employee turnover. It might even be related to impact, where I increased my team from 6 team members to 12 team members, because of the things that you've been able to do. So really trying to look at key measurable results that you can put into a section. And that really has to be on that front page before you even go into employee history. The next thing is employment history. And again, this is where I was saying we really want to focus more on the achievements that you've had in your career and then go into your employment history. Now, you still need to, people obviously still want to know what jobs that you've been in. So you need to list them in order of most recent job to the least recent job. You need to include your employer name, your position title, and the dates of employment. There's a lot of debate out there about how far back you should be considering your jobs. Some people say, oh, no one wants to know any, what beyond 10 years, it doesn't matter, or, no, you should be putting in all your career history. It really depends on the jobs that you've held, and it depends on the amount of time you're in those jobs and the significant achievements you've had in those jobs. So I still say that, 15 years of experience is enough. And again, it will depend on the jobs. You might have had a very significant job 20 years ago that you might not want to leave out because it really has brought you to where you are today. So it's really just a matter of working in the space that you have and working out what is the most important. In terms of the job duties, that is where we try and reduce the amount. You really need to consolidate this information and work out how much information and what information you can put in that's going to really make an impact in the few sentences that you've got to write it. And again, putting things in dot points. Dot points is a huge way much easier for recruiters to read than looking at paragraphs. So short one-line sentences and using action words when you're going to say. So words like exceeded, advised, managed, controlled, these kind of action words that you can use that will really enhance what you've said that you've done. Be specific with the dates. Now, this is a problem that a lot of people find. They'll say, oh, I worked for such and such from, say, 2017 to 2018. Is that December 2017 to January 2018? Were you only working there for 2 months, or were you there for 2 years? So really be specific with the dates and include the months and years of employment. Again, only try and use a maximum of 5 bullet points per job. You can add additional achievements here as well. So in not just the achievement section that you've got at the beginning, but you can add additional achievements in your employment history as well. But it's very much a match of trying not to put too much information, but getting the right information in. Next information section that you would put in is your education. So some people will say have your education at the beginning, some people will say at the end. I tend to say education at the beginning for graduates, and information towards after your employment history if you're not a graduate. So you want to list
Elissa, can I ask a question which we have just received? One participant has asked, I want to apply for example for an accountant job. My CV should include only the accounting experience, or it is okay if I put my old experiences? Because that may be something which you can just share.
Depending on the level of experience that you've had, if you want to apply for an accounting job, but you've only had 3 months counting experience, then of course you want to really include the other work experience that you've had, because all of the experience you've had will lead to the job that you're applying for, other skills that you've picked up that are transferable. If you're saying, well, I've worked as an accountant for 15 years, but I used to be an admin officer before that, that's the information that you'd probably leave out. You can list the skills that you've had in the previous job. So in those key skills, you might say, well, strong administration skills, but your focus is really going to be on the accounting work. So depending on how much experience you've had in accounting, how much experience you've had in the other areas, try and weigh it up. So your focus is that you are accounting focused, but not to discount the experience you've had from the other roles, which will be transferable to new roles as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So again, education, highest level first, whether you've done a degree, your master's, if you've done your PhD, whatever it is, you might have only finished high school. Whatever you want to put, you put in your highest level first, and then you need to follow with, you know, the second and third highest, and list the relevant training courses that you've completed. So a lot of people will have in-house training courses that they've done. Really try and think back to the courses that you've done, because these can be important. Again, the level of importance will depend on how much you've only really got that. You've got to keep your mind with that 2-page limit. So if you're light on work experience, but you've done a lot of training, it's important to put it in. If you've got more relevant work experience than, say, you know, the customer experience course that you might have done, maybe leave that off. The important information is to put the name of the course, the institution that you studied that through, and also the year that you completed the course. People want to know this. Don't put any outdated courses in. So you might have done, you know, courses back in, you know, 1995 that aren't necessarily going to be relevant today. We're really talking about just up-to-date, important courses that you've done. Or if it's really obviously a degree or something like that, or a significant tertiary course that you've done, that doesn't matter when you've done it. To say that you've done it is important. As I said, if your education's fairly limited, so if you only finished, you know, high school, but you didn't proceed through that, then you're not really going to focus on the education section of your CV. You're really going to focus on the work. And again, if you're a recent graduate, putting your GPA and specific course information into that, that section as well is also important for employers to see. We're going to get to technical skills. So technical skills isn't just for IT people. It's really important these days to put it across any industry, because every industry has a section, some form of database or some form of system that they use, which can be beneficial across different, across your industry. So whether it's an accounting-based software, if you've done MYOB, if you've done QuickBooks, having this information in is important. If you're in, you know, even hospitality, having FPOS or Micros systems, something like that, or HR systems, being able to use Workday, or different people use different systems like Oracle, and those kind of systems are really important. Again, based on the space that you've had, if you don't think that you've got a lot of technical knowledge, maybe try and fit those words in elsewhere, say in your employment history, say I used Oracle, or I used PMP through something, rather than having these are the sections that you can have, but again, what's most important will depend on how much experience you've had and how relevant it is. And when it comes to the job description for a job you're applying for, obviously if they say we want someone with you know, JavaScript and VMware or something like that, specific that they need it, that's when it's obviously key to have that experience listed in your CV. Microsoft, most people will have Microsoft Word. It's not necessarily something you need to put into your CV, but if you're finding that you've got a section and you really want to fill it out, and if you're early in your career, listing that you have, you know, Microsoft, PowerPoint, Excel, these things can also be important, but don't waste space on it if you don't need to.
Elissa, there is a question which has just come. So when we come to the previous part, so when we mention what is career achievements, can you just elaborate what can be included? Because, for example, people may be having a career achievement of award on so and so. So what are the key achievement criteria which we should keep and what we should exclude?
So have a think. It's always good to go back to if you've done annual performance reviews, and like I said, some people say, oh, but I haven't really achieved that much in my job. I just go to work. And that's not true, because usually we've all done something in our jobs that we can definitely be proud of and has made the working day easier for everyone involved. Now, like I said, you could have a top executive sales job where you have typically listed, your job is to increase sales and increase revenue. And that makes it fairly easy for you to put down. But if you're, say, in a finance job, an insurance job, that you might think, oh, how do I do this? So it might be that you've implemented a system, say, if you're insurance, being able to process claims quickly, so that they get through faster. So it's putting in information like that, or creating a new Excel system so that information's calculated more easily. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head for different industries. It might be if you're in hospitality, you might say we were able to, by implementing this system, we were able to get more customers in to increase, which obviously increase revenue into a restaurant. Or it might be just, you know, if you're working in an administration role, looking at systems to, so that less manpower is used. So even if it's, you know, we used to go to the post office twice a day to collect mail, and now we only need to go once because we're having more, you know, something else happen, and this means that we're spending less time out of the office, you know. So just things that you've done to really improve productivity, improve budgeting, improve time processing.
And the process, basically, and that can be brought in. Okay. So yeah,
growth,
can I just...
Growth, anything that's increased growth, anything that's helped reduction, anything that's had a particular impact, and anything to do with frequency. So sped up or slowed down depending on what the job is.
Okay, thank you, Abdul Rahman, for the question. So I hope this helped you. And one more question which has been raised: is it mandatory to have a separate section of technical skills in CV? Can we include it in our key skills? Yes.
So that will depend, again, on space. If you, again, say are a graduate and you don't have a lot of space to fill in because you've maybe only ever had a part-time job, you know, delivering plants or something like that. So your CV is not going to be filled out with someone who's maybe an executive that's had 25 years experience. So if you are a graduate, that's more, or someone who's only 1 or 2 years into their career, you might say technical skills because you've got the space to put that in. For other people, their work experience, their education, and their key skills and achievements are going to be a lot more important. So that's where you'd maybe use your technical skills in, say, your key skills section, or you might use it in dotted through your CV and the work experience that you've had. It really depends on the industry and how much focus you need to have, and what the job description is saying will require it, which I'll go into a little bit further in a second. So I'll just finish these things. So volunteer work, again, a section that might be included, it might not. For people who've maybe been out of the workforce for a long time, who are looking to get back into the workforce and say, oh, you know, I haven't worked for 5-10 years because I've been raising my children. But you might have done some volunteer work, particularly with a school or a community organisation, especially if it's relevant to the job or the industry. So if you're maybe doing some part-time accounting work with a school or something for free, or the Parents Association, that kind of thing is really important to put in when you're looking for a job. Again, if it's not important, if it's not relevant, and you don't have the space, it's not critical to put in. Well, it's definitely not critical, but I'd avoid putting it in when you've got more important things. So it's balancing that level of importance depending on your experience. Affiliations and memberships, this is an area that people often forget. So if you are part of any professional organisation, say finance organisation, accounting organisation, HR organisation, make sure that you put this in, and how long you've been in the organisation, how long you've been a member for. Board membership, extremely important. If you are on a board, that's very key to have on your CV. If you are looking to advance particularly more in an executive role. You can include personal groups, clubs, community groups, again, space dependent. But if you are, it's quite important to have it if you're in a professional group, because it just shows that you are even more invested in your career than just having a job that you do. So that's important as well. And again, I'm just adding some additional information to add for people who probably haven't thought about this stuff, but can also be really important to have. So if you've written any publications, say you wrote an article that was published even on LinkedIn or in a trade magazine, in a newspaper, online, definitely put this information in, and you can look up online how you would present this on your CV. There's specific guidelines on how you can do that. Any scholarly articles or journals, this tends to be more for people who are in an academic area. Any speaking engagements that you've had. So if you have spoken at a conference or even in company training things, if you've been asked to present something, this kind of information is also really important, but especially if you're going for a position where you might be required to do public speaking in the role that you will be employed into. If you've got different languages, so if you've got not just English but other languages, this can be really helpful as well. You don't need to have that in a separate section. That can even be in your personal information section. If you've got licenses that are specific to your industry, any trade licenses or certificates, or if you've got or something, for example, if your job requires you to be driving around, mentioning that you have a car license is definitely important. Yeah, as I said, industry certificates, special visas and clearances. It's always helpful, particularly in the UAE. If you've already got a residence visa, they're aware that you're able to get one, that you've managed to pass through security clearance and there's no issues there. So it can be helpful to have that information. Hobbies and interests, again, it's only something that you would put in if you were stuck for space and needed to fill something in. And perhaps if the job sort of was a community related job where they'd want to know that you had some sort of outside activities that were aligned with their organisation. Say if it was a non-profit organisation and you said that you volunteer with someone on the weekends. But generally I would tend to put that, keep them off for a professional CV.
Elissa, can I just ask a question right now? There is a question which I have come. Thank you, Ramakrishna, for the question. So he's asking, I'm applying for different roles currently, but what I don't have, some roles I don't have much experience in that, but I have some competencies which can be added. So do I need to have multiple CVs? That is his question. For example, when I do as a person, he need to have multiple CVs which should be aligned to different roles. So that is what he's asking.
Applying for jobs can be a full-time job in itself, because you really need to tailor your CV. And this is what I was saying about one CV doesn't fit all, because if you're applying for a job as an accountant, but most of your experience is as an admin officer, you really want to be focusing your CV on the accounting skills that you have. So say if you've studied accounting, but you've worked in administration, but you really want to work in accounting, you need to focus on the skills that you've learned through your education and putting those, say, at the beginning of the key achievements. You might even achieve something even through, say, if you did a university course and you led the team to present a fantastic presentation or project that you got, A+ for or something. That would be an achievement that an accountant would look at and say, oh, that's great. In practice, they're doing it. We can see that they're doing it in, this will cross over into actual work experience. Additionally, the skills that first of all, you'd want to say in your profile, my experience, I have worked as this, but my aim is to move into the accounting industry and I'm looking for an opportunity here. And I will provide great ambition and drive to achieve this with a reputable organisation such as yours or whatever. You need to be able to say what you're going to do for a company and how they, how you could benefit them. So again, like I said, you want to tailor your CV to the jobs that you're applying for, even if you don't have a lot of experience, whether you're going to tell them that you plan to continue studying, whether you tell them that you can learn quickly on the job, and also using those transferable skills. So obviously in an administration job, and you're applying for accounting, you know, you're talking up your Excel skills and your, you know, the skills that you've learnt, even dealing with customers and dealing with complaints and things, that's still a skills that you're going to be using a lot in an accounting job. So focusing on those transferable skills.
Thank you, Elissa. And I have a question. So for example, when we mention achievements, and if I am a fresher, for example, I want to apply for an internship job, or I just want to go into a trainee role. What are the key areas as a fresher or an entry-level professional who is immediately out of college I should be focusing on in my CV?
Yeah, so generally with graduate positions, I mean, the education tends to be, you might be a graduate who you might have gone back to university at a later stage in your life. You might have studied part-time while you were working in another job, or you might be just finished school, still living at home with your parents, you know, having only ever done university and maybe one small job that you had to earn a bit of extra money during the summer. This is where your university experience or your education experience, sorry, is going to be key to what you've learned. So really focusing, this is where you would put your education before you put your work experience, because that's going to be the main focus of what you do. And then really writing in your personal profile about the type of job that you want to do and why you're passionate about that industry. So your focus is not really going to be on the job if it's a job that's completely irrelevant. In saying that, having a job while studying also shows that you are motivated and capable of multitasking as well. So handling your study experience while, you know, being able to study and coordinate that inside with alongside another job as well. So still sort of saying it is important too. And especially if you were in, say, a part-time job, if you were studying law and you had a job on Friday afternoons, you know, going and helping out and even doing the, you know, the basic duties at a law firm, you know, those kind of things are really helpful to show that you are passionate about the industry that you're trying to get into. So, yeah.
Thank you, Elissa.
Okay, so we're just going to talk about applicant tracking systems now. If you don't know what an applicant tracking system is, these are basically databases. They use and sort job applications depending on the work experience that someone has. So say if you're applying to, most large companies will now use an applicant tracking system because it's quick, it's easy, and it allows recruiters to access the top resumes they can without having to go through hundreds of CVs, which is time consuming. So this is where it's really important for job seekers to really make sure they've got the right information in their CV because they want to make sure that they are in that top list. So the system generally, the way that it filters, and I'll explain it in a minute, basically it filters CVs based on information that's in the CVs, and it ranks them from, you know, the top level, what they consider the top level CVs through to the lower level CVs. So just in terms of statistics, so 98% of Fortune 500 companies use some form of recruitment software. 78% of employers say that using an applicant tracking system makes finding their talent much easier than ever. They say 68% say that the best way to improve recruiting performance is by investing in technology, and 94% of recruiters and hiring professionals say that using the software has really impacted their recruitment process positively. So again, very critical for people to start getting used to the fact that it's probably a system checking their CV rather than, you know, an actual person. Again, networking is still incredibly important, and we will talk about that. But when in terms of actually applying for a job, whether you apply for a job on LinkedIn or through a jobs portal like Got Talent, or whether you apply direct to a company and it goes into their system, chances are an applicant tracking system is going to be seeing it first.
Yeah, Elissa, there is a question which has come. So the question is, for example, you know, when we are applying in an ATS network or applicant tracking system, which format we should use, whether it is to be a Word document, whether it should be a PDF document, or whether it could be an image or JPEG. So which format will be appropriate so that it can be screened?
Great question. So I'm just going to go through that now. How to ensure your CV is ATS friendly. So this really is making sure that, first of all, that your CV gets through, because there's certain, depending on the software, sometimes you can be filtered out based on a number of things. My advice is to always submit a Word document, because that is guaranteed. Word will definitely get through. They're set up to have it in a Word document. You can, usually they'll tell you, sometimes you can add a PDF document, but that's generally what they're going to want to receive it in. The other thing is that you need to make sure, again, that your CV doesn't have any of those things in it, like even if you set your CV up using tables. Some people will use tables, so the formatting is fine. That's not necessarily always going to get through an applicant tracking system. So the golden rule and the rule of thumb is really to have your CV as plain and simple as possible. Take out any logos, take out any graphics, take out columns, anything that's anything that's not basic formatting, you really need to try and leave out so that it definitely does get through. The other thing is, and again, headers and footers, again, sometimes information that's in there can get trapped in the system. It's not to say it always is, but you're better to reduce your chances. And also using a chronological CV. So again, where we mentioned talking about your work experience, where you say this is my most recent job to my less recent jobs, rather than a functional CV where it doesn't talk about, you focus more on an overview of skills rather than the actual job, for people who've been in work for, longer than 5-10 years. There's information here also, which again, I said, well, we can send this out, using traditional CV fonts, not using anything too crazy, anything that's too hard to read. You want to make sure that it gets picked up. Now, the primary and key thing you need to focus on when you're doing your CV is making sure that you tailor it to the job that you're applying for. You need to have a look at the job description or the job advertisement that's been posted.
Sorry, Elissa, can you just repeat, because there was some break in between?
Okay. So you need to look at the keywords in the job description or job advertisement and see what is being highlighted. Obviously, in the section where it says, experience required, 3 years post-qualification experience in such and such, we need to have this technical skill, you need to have Excel, you need to have Salesforce, you need to have whatever. You're also looking at people who've, it might say this job involves travel, might say that they are a client-based position. So whatever the keywords are in the job description, pick them out and make sure that they are in your CV, because either the system or the recruiter will be looking at those keywords and asking the system to highlight the CVs and rank the CVs based on these keywords. You don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to be having keywords like, 100 of the keywords in your CV just to add them in. You don't want to look like your CV is stuffed with keywords for the sake of it, but you need to make sure those words are also consistently used throughout your CV, whether you list them as a key skill, whether you put them in your personal profile, whether you list those words in the jobs that you've done, in your employment history, but making sure those keywords are in your CV, and also your cover letter if a cover letter has been requested. And I'm going to show you a tip in a minute on how to actually do that. But that is really, really, really important to make sure that you get those keywords in.
There's a question which came, I think Elissa, probably this will be relevant at this stage. It is from Ashish. Thanks, Ashish, for asking this question. Given ATS scans for keywords, if we include all the relevant keywords, how to rank, or probably how I will come in the list with respect to ranking? Is it like that? As my CVs, whether it comes on top or not?
It will depend on the system, and it will depend on the recruiter. So they might have a system that says rank the top 3 most important skills to have. And that will say something like they need to have customer service, they need to have communication, and they need to have finance experience. And they will put those in, and the system will pass through the CVs and find the ones that have the most of those in there, and the most relating to that. It's hard to say because of the technical. You don't want to just, you're not going to say, I am a financial person with financial experience in the financial industry. You're not going to try and fill it like that, because that would make it sound, it still needs to be readable, but you need to make sure that it's mentioned enough times that your CV will get picked up over someone who doesn't have it that many times. So again, it's balancing it to make sure it's still readable.
Elissa, can you repeat that part? There was a lag in the listening part.
So you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So you need to make sure the keywords are in there, and I'm going to show you some tools how to do that. But again, priority is making sure that your CV is readable. You don't want to say, I'm a financial expert in the financial industry in my financial job, but you would still want to use one word of finance to make sure that it's listed. So it still needs to be readable and in context, but you still want to be able to have that word mentioned. So it's just a matter of dotting those words in strategically, so that the keywords that you will find, so that your chance of having your CV ranked higher is much better. So
thank you.
I'll just show you. Okay, so some helpful CV tools. What I was saying about the keywords, there's a number of things that you can use. So there's some links here for word clouds, word art, and Wordle. These are systems, these are free online tools where you can copy and paste the information for a job description and put it into their system, and that will tell you how many keywords they are. So it might say, okay, this word is mentioned 10 times, this word is mentioned 7 times, this word is mentioned 3 times, and that will give you an idea of what the key words are, so you can make sure that you put those words into your CV. Again, it's going to be different for each job that you apply for, so it's really important to be tailoring your CV to the job that you're applying for. So that's primarily what it is. The other thing with CV, obviously, you want to make sure that your grammar, your punctuation is correct, your spelling is correct. So many CVs will be put away because they have spelling mistakes and grammatical errors. There's a website here called Grammarly. If you don't use it, it's really good to have because that will scan your document to make sure that everything is correct. There is a website called JobScan as well. That you can use some free versions of it. It'll give you a limited number of times you can use it. But again, that's where you might compare your job description to, or your job advertisement to your CV, and it'll give you a ranking on how well your CV ranks for an ATS system, like a percentage ranking. And also I've put thesaurus there as well, which is just another tool to have if you start struggling to think of different words or action words for the job duties that you've done. It's also helpful to try and come up with some additional words that you might not be able to think of but need some help with. So these are tools that will really help you with your CV. And final notes, keeping it simple, keeping it real, don't lie in your CV, don't make up things because chances are you will get caught out. Making sure that you are fully aware of your CV. So when people ask you, oh, you worked at this place during this time, you know, oh yeah, don't be vague about what you've done. Letting your personality shine. There's no point having a CV that doesn't really talk about who you are because you're the person that is going for the job. Making sure it's relevant and checking your grammar and spelling. That is really important as well.
Yeah, there's a question which came, Elissa, with regard to, there are many agencies in the market saying that they will create ATS CV and charging the candidates. But I saw many who avail it, but still not able to get successful. So is it better to do CV by ourselves or approach any professional agency? What will be the success criteria?
Okay, so there's a number of things that you can consider. I am a CV writer myself, so you know, this is my business, but I don't always say to use a CV service because sometimes they can be expensive, and when people don't necessarily have the money to spend on a CV, professional CV, then maybe, and if they have the time to invest in a CV writing person to do it for them, then by all means. My suggestion is always just to try and give it a go yourself if you have the time. And then if you really say, this is just too hard and I don't feel like I'm presenting myself in the best possible way, then maybe reach out to a CV writing company. I always suggest to look at you know, recommendations and people who've used the service before. And I also say, find out what the services are that they provide. So, for example, some companies will say, send me your existing CV and we'll ask you a few questions in a questionnaire and then we'll turn it back out to you. That's not really finding out who you are or what you're looking for. You should always be making sure that you at least have a consultation. You should always make sure that a CV writer knows the industry that you're looking at and understands the market that you're looking in. So obviously having someone locally rather than overseas doing it. Again, you might have a CV that only needs a little bit of work. So say, for example, I get people emailing me saying, you know, what do you think? And I'll say, let's just have a talk rather than me actually doing your CV for you, because you've got all the information. You don't want to have to pay to have someone rewrite it when it's fairly good itself. You might just need some tips and tricks with that. So as a rule, perhaps if you have the time, some people don't have the time. They've got full-time jobs, children that they need to focus on, and a lot of other things happening. And in that case, that's maybe when you would pass it on to someone who's experienced in the first place. But otherwise, I always suggest, you know, try it yourself, see how you go. And if you're still feeling like you're not confident, then maybe reach out to a CV writer, like myself.
Thank you, Elissa, for that. And there is another question which has been shared by Muhammad Muntasar. Thank you for the question. The question, I think it is about, can we use PowerPoint as a file in preparing the CV?
No. That's unadvisable. One, because of going through a system, and look, there's varying ways, and again, it will depend on the industry. So if you're in a creative industry, in a design industry, these are things that might make a difference to how you present your CV. You'll find that a lot of design CVs, people want them to go directly to their portfolio, so they'll highlight that, but it might only be a one-page CV because they're an industry where less is more. But in terms of PowerPoint, firstly, where you've got to think of how a recruiter would look at this and say, well, first of all, it needs to get through the system. Mostly they ask for a Word or a PDF. Secondly, if you do get through the system, you've got to think that a recruiter needs to print this off for someone to read. So they're not going to want to print off a PowerPoint that is going to be, however many pages long, because one, that wastes paper, and two, it's more information that they have to filter through. So you're really just looking at a 2-page, possibly 3 or 1, 2 or 3 page, preferably 2-page document that they can print off and be able to read and hand off to a hiring manager or whatever it is, whoever's going to be, the manager of that role. Does that make sense? Oh. Seem to have lost Phoebe. Or maybe it's me.
Internet connection. Can you repeat? Elissa, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, there was an internet connection. So can you repeat that answer in between? The last part.
Yeah, the short answer is no. Use a Word document, preferably 2 pages. Don't use a PowerPoint, because that's not suitable for recruiters.
Okay. Now there is another question which was by Ziyad Al-Dawaf. Ziyad is asking, how does video CVs work? Do they go through an ATS system?
Generally not, unless the system accepts it. Again, this generally tends to be industry-based. My suggestion with the style of video is give the employer or give the recruiter what they're asking for. So if they say, please send a Word document, then send a Word document. If they say, tell us about yourself and who you are, you can always apply through a system, but try and find the person's contact details, their email, and say, hey, I've applied on the system, but here I really am, and if you want them, because that'll show that you've gone above and beyond the standard application, and that they really want to see you and what you've done. So that's definitely something you can do, but in the terms of actually applying for a standard job through a standard system, apply the way that they have requested.
And thank you, Elissa. Thank you very much. And there is a question, the maximum number of pages of CV, whether it should be 2 or should be 3. It's a repeated question which is coming.
Absolutely maximum 3. If you have a lot of things that you've done, say, for example, published a lot of articles, done a lot of education and training, those kind of things. But you really are looking more at the preference is 2 pages. Or if you really don't have much work experience, more on the graduate level, then I'd look at 1 page. But 2 pages is the sort of standard for now.
Now, one more question which has come. If there is a request in the job advertisement to add the salary to expectation, add the salary to expectation, what is the best way to do that?
That is hard to say, because again, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by putting too much or too little. My instinct is to put what you think would be a fair pay for the job role. You don't necessarily want to say, oh, well, you know, I only want to get paid this amount for this, but they're actually planning on paying more, because then you might look like you're not putting enough. Or if you put too high an amount, then, you know, they might say, oh, your salary expectation is too high. I think it's a silly question for employers. I think that's something that you should not be questioned about in the first instance. You can, if you're allowed to write, you can always say, something like something in line with my experience. You could put your current salary if it's a comparable job, so they know what to look for, or just really think what you would expect to get paid for that type of role. It's sort of an irrelevant question, really, because so many people get the question wrong. They might put it not at all the right answer because they might not understand the scope of the role, and job titles can be so misleading, because what might be a director in one job might be an administrator in another. So it's a hard question to answer, really.
Thank you very much, Elissa. And for example, there is a question like, sometimes we have a soft skill, which is more of a personal skill, which people think they have. So the question is, can we mention that in the skill set?
Absolutely. I would suggest putting half soft skills and half hard skills, because soft skills are almost more important than hard skills. A lot of soft skills might not be teachable. You might be naturally an empathetic person, and that might be really important, especially if you're going into a counselling role, or a role where you're dealing with vulnerable people, a role where you are definitely communicating with people. That might be really important. Say, communication, I think, is key in every job, but it's making yourself stand out against other people. Even words like emotional intelligence, if you believe you've got strong emotional intelligence, those kind of things are really important to put in. Definitely soft skills in addition to hard skills.
Thank you. And one more question which has come up, Elissa. So coming back to salary expectation, so how do we respond to salary expectation while applying online? So, you know, in some systems, the bank will say, what is your expected salary? Or if it is an organization in their career portal asking that question, and they are giving a range, what should we do? Do we just say nil, or do we have to answer something? So that is the question which has.
Well, again, it's difficult. It's like the other question where you might have, so some people might say, well, in my current role, I earn this, and I'll be expecting something the same, if that's true, or expecting slightly more. Or some people will say, again, dependent on the, in line with the job expectations. It's hard to say, because the job, like I said, the job description might not necessarily make it clear what the level of experience is. Often people will apply for a job and they'll say, oh, actually that's, you know, a lower job than what I'm used to. It was printed, you know, it was described as a little bit more senior. So, you know, what you might say, well, I'm expecting, you know, 50,000 dirhams a month for this job, but it's really only a 15,000 dirham a month job, sort of thing. So it's very hard to say. It's what you feel comfortable with. Again, I don't think it's a hard and fast thing for recruiters to say, oh, well, they're expecting too much, so we're not going to interview them. I think it's more just a guide for them to say, oh, okay, well, you know, this is what people are expecting for this role. So I think it's a silly question, particularly in Dubai, where, or even in the Emirates, where the job salaries really are far different across the board. So it's hard to decide what the pay is going to be, because you just never know.
Okay, and I think maybe something which they can look into is the research reports of various headhunting consulting organizations to get a range. Usually they have their annual reports being published, which probably gives some indication.
Yes, Hayes do a salary report, but again, it's so far ranging, and you will find even for an administration job, they might say, you know, some administration jobs pay $2,500 a month through to they might get paid $40,000 a month, depending on which organisation and what the skills are. So even though they're all in that administration sector, so it's hard to say.
Thank you, Elissa.
Okay.
So, can I ask the next question? I think a lot of questions are coming. And,
sure.
Yeah. So the question is, this is coming from Ashish. Thanks, Ashish. If we approach a professional to write our CV, what details should we communicate to the professional in order that he or she understand our needs?
Okay, so this is where I really think that actually having a consultation, a proper consultation with someone, being able to speak face to face is definitely important, because it really allows the CV writer to get an understanding of your personality, of the type of job you're looking for, and the experience you've had. I know with my consultations that my first thing would be sending out a questionnaire, and that gets as much information that I'm requesting in addition to a CV. Some people don't have a CV, so they might need to fill out a lot of information, or they might have a CV and just add some additional information. Then during the consultation, I can really hone in on what the person is looking for and what they really want to achieve with their job search and what they want to achieve on their CV. You should, if you're looking for a CV writer, they should have access to job scanning databases, so they are able to do the scanning for you and say, okay, so based on this job, you're ranking. Oh, you there?
Yeah, we have that, yes. Yeah, listening.
You're ranking only at 50%, so what do we need to do to increase your chances for this job? Being able to really focus on what's important. A good CV writer should be able to see what's important to you and be able to advise on how best to get that information across. So I definitely think a consultation is one of the biggest things you need to look at, rather than just, you know, sending your information off. And if you're going to invest in a CV writer, you want to make sure that you're speaking to them face to face. At the moment, meeting in person is a little difficult with the COVID situation, but, you know, people can meet on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you, Elissa. One more question, which has, especially for people who are new to the job sector, how to catch employers' attention if you have not got sufficient experience in terms of what job is demanding?
That's where you need to focus on your personality and what you can give to them. So you might not be able to provide them with years of experience in your industry, but you can provide them with your enthusiasm, your drive, and your willingness to achieve and experience. So being able to say things like, even, you know, I'm prepared to come and do a week's work experience to show you that I'm dedicated, you know, a free week of work experience, really showing people what it is that you're prepared to put towards their company because you really want to work for their company. Companies also really like to hear how great they are. So I will actually just quickly go into this. We don't need to go into it too much. Again, you can look at this cover letter, but the cover letter sort of is your introduction to an employer. Employers really want to know what it is about them you want to work for. So one of the things that we have in what I suggest in cover letters, even if there's a job that hasn't been advertised, but you want to work for that company. So you might look at either on LinkedIn or the company website, having a look at their media page and saying, oh, I saw that you have recently, merged with such and such company, or I saw that you recently did something in the news, we're part of a charity event, and that really aligns with my personal values or something. So really letting them know that you've done your research and that you are really interested. Same as when you're applying for a job, whether you apply by email or sending them a Word document, know the name of the person that you're sending it to, know their position. There is nothing worse as a recruiter than just getting a standard, dear sir, madam, please see my application, and then just getting a generic cover letter or a generic email that has been sent to 50 people. Your job is to really find out about the person, about the company, and letting them know why you want to work for them. That in itself is going to be a huge difference between your average letter or your average application and something that's going to be of interest to them. You said that you barely get any time to focus on what it is. So they really want to see something and go, oh yes, this person has gone out of their way to really apply for a job. So that's a good way of standing out. Even if you don't have necessarily all the experience, it shows that you are dedicated to them. Okay.
Elissa, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask? Yeah. So the question is, for example, one is about whom we should use as references in case someone is asking for references. The question is, can we use friends? Can we use teachers? Can we use employer?
If you're a student, absolutely. Use your lecturers, use your teachers. They definitely can speak on behalf of you because they've probably had experience with projects that you've done. In terms of employers, any previous employer, obviously if you're currently in a job, you're obviously not going to say to your boss, unless they know that you're about to become redundant, or you've for whatever reason that you're going to be laid off in the next 2 months and they're aware of it, then you could ask them to be referee. But if you are in a secure job, obviously you're not going to ask your boss, but you need to be able to ask, you would have someone from your previous employer or previous employer before that. You may, depending on your relationship with people, maybe have someone with your current employment who works in a different department who you might have worked with. And another thing you can do, particularly for people who have their own business, if it's your own business, you're your own boss. So that's where you can ask clients and people like that to speak on behalf of you as well.
Thank you, Elissa. Now we have a couple of questions coming. You want to complete the cover letter part?
I can just finish this quickly. Again, most of the information's on the slide, so it's fairly self-explanatory, but I think people can probably just read that where it says, making sure you're addressing it to the right person, telling an employer why you want to work for them, telling a company, again, adding those keywords and letting them know what you can do for them, and letting your personality shine through as well. This is fairly self-explanatory. I mean, there's more information on it, but I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, we have a question from Sanjay. So how can we identify fake job posts? How safe is our data, and any genuine job portals you will recommend in UAE? I think it is a bit different, but good question.
Yeah. Okay. So LinkedIn is definitely a safe job portal that you can apply through because they're usually affiliated with a job. The things to be looking at would be a fake company, if they don't have a proper company page, if they don't have a proper company website.
the best way to find out whether a job is real is calling the company and being able to say, I've seen this job advertised. I just want to confirm that it's legitimate. And again, this is where you can use your time to find out, okay, who is recruiting for this job? What's the recruiter's name or the hiring manager's name? And being able to tailor, you know, even if they only ask for a CV, it doesn't hurt to include a cover letter in the same document so that that you have got the chance to say, I've made the effort to find out who you are, and this is what I want to apply for, not just the CV in itself. So yeah, that's how you can tell. I mean, there's so many. The other thing is that most of the recruitment websites are spider websites. So a company might only advertise on one website, but then that gets picked up by another website, which gets picked up on another website. Indeed, for example, is one of these spider sites where you'll have a job advertised, and as a recruiter, you'll get a CV saying, I saw your job advertised on Indeed. Like, well, I didn't advertise it, but it's been picked up through these things. So it is hard to tell. My suggestion is to always try and find out it'll either become through a recruitment agency, so you can call the recruitment agency and say, just want to confirm that this is, you know, you're advertising this job and it's for a legitimate company, or you can call the company itself and confirm. Because a lot of time too, they might advertise a job and you might say, oh, it was advertised 3 months ago. Are they still recruiting? Are they not recruiting? Has the job been filled? Sometimes they're not always taken off. So I think it's a great idea to always call the company to find out, is the job still available?
Thank you, Elissa. Thank you. I think we can proceed with the cover letter and move into the next part.
Okay, well, we've technically got 8 minutes left. So
Yeah.
what I might do is I'll just stop sharing my screen. You can't see my LinkedIn yet, can you?
Not yet. You can then bring it back.
Here we go. So this is my LinkedIn profile. There's a lot of different things that you can do with a LinkedIn profile. And I'm going to have to run through them very, very quickly, but it might be another session that we can hold if anyone's interested, if they want to get more of an insight into how to fully complete their LinkedIn profile. It's called LinkedIn optimization. And this is another service that I provide to clients, which usually goes hand in hand with updating a CV. So there's a lot of different sections that you'll have with your LinkedIn profile that you really need to maximize in order to benefit from the fact that a lot of recruiters, 77% of recruiters rely on LinkedIn to do their recruiting for them. So a lot of the time they won't even advertise a job because they know there's going to be candidates ready and waiting on LinkedIn just to get that message and say, would you be interested in this position? And that is because advertising costs money. Depending on who you advertise and how long you advertise, it can add a lot of money to the advertising budget. So to be able to do a search, and especially executive search for executive level positions, this is how they find people. So you will really want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. First, most important key thing is having a smiling photo. People want to be able to see you. You will get 80% more chance of having someone click on your profile and contact you if you've got a photo there. So you really want a smiling photo. In terms of there's so many different sections, and this really is something that we really need to look at in more depth. But in terms of the profile section, there's a tab here called Add Profile Section, and that will go through all the sections that you can complete in order to really enhance your profile. So the intro, mine says mine's looking good. This is a very short paragraph about who you are. You don't need to put in, you know, if your current job is the learning director for something, you don't want to say learning director at ABC Group. You want to say that you're a learning and development professional with, you know, 15 years experience in the education industry or something along those lines. You really want to stand out. It just needs to give an overall scope and sound interesting about what you are. And then in the next section, which is the about section, that's where you would give a more detailed overview of who you are. Now in LinkedIn, there is a section called Open to Job Opportunities. And I filled mine in to say that if these are the sort of jobs that I was going to apply for, this is what I would be looking for. So recruitment management, HR management, you're allowed up to 5, and you really want to include these. It only gives you a maximum of 5 job titles, but you need to add the top 5 job titles for the jobs that you're looking for. You need to add the location. So whether you're interested in just UAE jobs or jobs overseas, and the job roles that you're looking for. There's a section here that says only recruiters or all LinkedIn members. If you're currently employed and you don't want your current employer knowing that you're considering alternate work, you tick the only recruiters. If not, if you're open for everyone, click all LinkedIn members. And if you're not looking for a job, you can say that you're no longer open. A tip with updating your LinkedIn profile, if you are employed and you don't want people to know that you're, actively on LinkedIn, your current employer, when you fill out your experience section, which is your work experience, it will ask you about your most recent job, and it will say, do you want your connections notified about this? If you don't want them to know, make sure you tick no. Any information you tick for previous jobs will never be promoted anyway, so it doesn't necessarily matter. Going back to this profile section, again, there's a huge amount of detail that I could tell you about this, but one thing I just do want to highlight is that you make sure that you fill in as many sections as you can. This section is featured, so if you've done anything where you've got a media release or a link or an article, this section, that's sort of a more advanced section, but something to look into. The background, make sure you fill in all your work experience, your education, certificates, volunteer experience. The skills section, you're allowed up to 50 skills. And my suggestion, I've already reached my limit of 50, add your 50 skills. Don't leave it at 2 or 3 or 10, because the skills that are listed here, as soon as you start typing in a skill, I can't because I've got too many. If you typed in a skill and said, say, finance, then that is going to come up as an option. And when recruiters are using LinkedIn to search for skills, if you've got a matching skill, so they will search, I need someone who's in Dubai, who's got finance, who's got budget control, and who's got MYOB. If you have those skills listed, your name will come up in the list. Along again with the keywords that you need to have through your LinkedIn, making sure you've got all of this information in your CV, in your LinkedIn as well as your CV is really important. So maximize your skills. The other information, accomplishments, anything that you've done. So again, publications, courses that you've done, if you've won any awards, languages that you know, those kind of things. And another section is requesting a recommendation. So this is really important to get, this is where people endorse you. So you can reach out to, say, former colleagues or managers or people that you've worked with that you're connected with on LinkedIn, and ask them if they would say something nice about you, so that can be listed on your profile as well, because recruiters will say, oh, look, 10 people have said what a great guy he is to work for. Well, I would like to consider working with that guy, or I think this company would like to work with him because he comes well recommended. So don't feel shy about asking someone to endorse you. That's something that's very widely used on LinkedIn as well. Another thing with LinkedIn quickly, really it's probably...
I think, yeah, we are on the time and we will just wind up in 5 minutes, Elissa.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you quickly, one of the things, and probably again another session, but LinkedIn is a massive networking tool. So being able to connect with key people, if you see a job advertised or you see a company that you'd like to work for, connect with someone, find someone in HR to connect with them, reach out to them, send them a message to say, hi, I'm really interested in your company. Is there any opportunities? Follow their company page, show your interest in that company by connecting and networking with that group of people. That's really, really important to do that across all the companies and all the industries that you're looking into. Join the groups that have, that you are interested in. So if it's a specific organizational group that's listed on LinkedIn, join that group as well so that you're continually kept in the loop about updates and information that's in your industry. Those kind of things are really, really important as well.
Yeah, Elissa, there is a question probably that is relevant. So does the LinkedIn profile have to be the mirror image of my CV or short?
No, it can be longer because you've got more space. Whereas a CV, you're really trying to look at that 2-page limit. You've got more space. Some things have character limits, like your sort of opening bio and the about section. They do have limits that you can fill in, and even employment have limits, but they're much bigger limits than what you might have to fill in your space. I also recommend, again, trying to still keep rather than writing paragraphs about your job, trying to really follow that dot point format is helpful because it makes it easy to read. But again, you've got much more space and much more information you can add to LinkedIn than a CV, which is why it's important.
Yeah, thank you, Elissa. And one more question which we will try to address. As a fresher who is not having an experience, Naushin has shared this question. What kind of jobs are suitable for them? I mean, where they can get suitable job or according to academic background? So
obviously, if you've got your degree is hopefully something that you've done that is in the area of interest that you are looking at. So if it's, say, accounting and finance, looking for those jobs, a really big focus would be on graduate jobs, internships, those types of positions for various companies. And again, writing even to small companies to say, I'm interested, and it might only be an administrative job in an accounting firm, but that's a step towards what you're looking to do. So, everyone has to start somewhere. You're never going to go straight into a management job or have the experience to go into a management job as a fresh graduate. So there's no point really applying for management jobs, but really looking at those sort of lower level jobs where you can start building your skills towards your career, and looking at those kind of things is a good way to start. So definitely graduate positions which are designed for graduates, but also, just jobs within the industry, or within small companies or within large companies that have whatever opportunities that are available to fit that skill set.
Yeah, thank you, Elissa. And we will close with one more question. And I request all the members who have joined to at least in the chat box, give your thoughts, at least one learning you are having from this session. And this last question is from Rua Salam. Rua is asking, if in the interview they ask me how much salary do you expect, what is the best way to answer?
Again, I just always say that it's in line with what the job role entails. So I think it's a fair salary. I think to say, I want a fair salary for the duties that are, for what the job is. It's always hard to say, well, I expect, who knows, it's a very difficult question and such an uncomfortable position. And sometimes you can put it back to the employer by saying, could you give me an idea of the range you're looking to pay for this role, to make sure we're in a ballpark. But I mean, to be honest, that kind of question should be out of the way, I think personally, before you even get to a face-to-face interview. They should really ask you that maybe on the phone first, so you don't have to, go through. But but by saying that you expect a fair salary for the job that you're applying for, or the job that you would be doing, I think is a fine sort of example. Or some people say, well, my current job, I'm being paid this amount, so I'd like to be paid either the same or more in line with the duties and responsibilities of the job that I'm applying for.
Thank you, Elissa. It was nice, and we had a good participation from most of our audience today. I request them, in case you missed any part, please visit our YouTube part, and also in the Facebook, it has been also live. So please utilize those platforms, and hopefully you will learn more. We will share the content from Elissa to all your emails shortly, in a couple of days. And in case of any further queries or any topics of your interest, please let us know so that we can have that in our next webinar series. And we take this time and to thank Elissa for her time. So Elissa will be also helping you to connect her through LinkedIn. Probably that may be helpful in case you have any specific queries, and we can reach out to her. We will have that contact in the email which we are sending across. Thank you, Elissa, and thank you all for the participants. And if you can connect through us in the LinkedIn, in the EIBFS, you can follow EIBFS in Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Please do that so that whatever relevant programs are happening, you can join there. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we are closing.